the big thing that I'm hoping that might help some people out is this right here, which is my pedal system for the PlayStation 2, which is my own design. I grabbed some ideas offline, but this is my very own design, and hopefully you can make something like this to go along with yours as well. Even if you don't have an arcade cabinet to put it in, maybe this is something that you can make this pedal so that you can play games like Time Crisis 2, Time Crisis 1, a whole bunch of others at your home in a similar way. So let's go through it. Now with the pedal, this is simply it's called a foot switch here. And it has one micro switch in it that clicks and that I've set when I click it down. It makes a connection, and that causes the game to recognize it as a button being pushed, which then in turn makes your character pop out of cover, and when you let it go, then they go back into cover on games like Time Crisis and other games that are set up for that. It has an AV cable with 3 cords in it, but I only used 2. So I just had the AV cable lying around, and it fits really nicely in with the black style of the pedal, and that is the only reason why I've used one with 3. So this is a yellow, red and white AV cable. So it's simply one of those cut down and put into here. But okay, so let's have a look a little bit more inside. So what we're looking at now is the inside of the door, and over here is where I have my AV cord. It is actually a PlayStation 2 AV cord, but you could use any type of cords that you like. I just had one of these that wasn't working, and I found out which cord wasn't working, and I made sure not to use that. But here I have an old PlayStation 1 controller, and I've zip tied it to the door here just to keep it out of the way, and I've made sure I've knotted my AV cord and found a little bracket that can't slip through. It stops any pulling of the AV cables in any particular way, and it stops it from being pulled out of here, which is the part that is essential for it to work. So if I unwind this tape here, we can have a little look inside. If you're doing your own pedal, this is the bit that you're going to want to be seeing. Okay, so here's my original controller here. Simply, that is a PlayStation 1 controller, and there's the backing, and I've taken it apart just by unscrewing the screws at the back. You don't need a special screwdriver for that one, just a standard screwdriver gets out all those, no security bits. And then this is the printed circuit board, or the PCB. Now, there are some bits exposed that you can use straight away. Now, the reason why this works and turns it into a pedal that you can use for the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 is because PlayStation set this up that you can use the second controller port and plug in any controller, and if you lay your controller down on the ground and any of these buttons are pushed, then it acts as a pedal. So essentially, you can do this by just laying down your second controller and standing on this side or any of these buttons, and it will work the same as a pedal, and it acts as a pedal for all the Time Crisis games and all the ones that have a cover mechanic. Because I knew that already, and because that's the way PlayStation set it up, all I have to do is set this up so that one button is pushed, and the PlayStation thinks one button has been pushed when my pedal is pressed. So I've taken my AV cables, and I've only used 2 of those. I've separated the 3 bits into 2. And what I've done here is I've soldered 2 pieces on. I played around with this until I found 2 that worked, but I can point them out for you. So this piece here, there are 3 exposed bits of copper with holes in them. So 1, 2, 3. What I've done is I've gone up to the 3rd one and put in my first cord. So I've put in my first bit of wire and I've soldered that piece just onto that 3rd one up. So the top copper piece with the hole in it, and that's my first place. The second place that I soldered onto was a little bit of exposed copper that is just above the triangle and over to the left. Now, once I had these 2 pieces soldered on here, then it was simply a matter of getting my foot pedal on the other side and taking my cord that's attached to one side to this, chopping it down and attaching it to the micro switch on the foot pedal. So let's take a little look at that. I'm just taking my foot pedal apart. Any type of foot pedal like this with a micro switch will work. If it has that micro switch in it, then it's quite an easy setup. Okay, I've just undone my screw at the back here if you have the same type as me. And then I've pushed out the bar. That screw goes into this little lathed piece in the middle to make sure that the bar can't move from the foot pedal. Because when it does, then it comes apart, spring, and here's my micro switch here. So there's a little diagram on the back of my foot pedal, and all that says is that you have 3 possible places that you can solder a wire. So once you have, and you can use whatever color you like, but just so that it's clear in this video, once you have your wire on the 3rd piece of copper from the bottom, the pieces of copper that have a little hole in them, and they're in a little rectangle, a white rectangle. So the top one, mine is red, and it goes from there and it goes all the way to the not the front piece of metal but the one behind it. The other one that I have is just above the triangle on the PCB, the printed circuit board, just above the triangle to the left, piece of copper there. I've got a white cord going from that, and it goes to the micro switch that is at the back. So essentially, if I look at the diagram here, the white cord from here, which is this one above the triangle, has gone to the one that says COM, and the red one, which is the 3rd one in the white rectangle, the 3rd, so the top section in the white triangle, which is the 3rd piece of copper with a hole in it from the bottom, so it's the one that's up the top in there, that has gone to this section which says red. It's a red cord, and I've put it to red, and that is the NO, which is the open setting. Okay, now when I've got that back together, I'll show you what happens. Okay, now that I've got the piece back together, what this is essentially saying is that I've got my white here, my red here, and it's open switch. Now when I push the foot pedal in, when it does that click, as soon as it clicks, it's making a connection. So those 2 connect, the white and the red, and that is telling the PlayStation that I'm pushing the button. As I said, that acts as the second controller, which is on the ground, and each time the foot pedal is pressed, it thinks one of these buttons is being pressed, and you go out from cover in those cover games. So that is how that works. It's confusing to explain, but it's not as hard as it sounds. So there are only 2 wires being used, and the only soldering that I've had to do is I've done 4 pieces of solder. So if you are no good with a soldering iron, you could get somebody else to have a go at those for you. I'm sure they wouldn't mind doing 4, or you could even tape them down. Not that I would recommend that. A solder point is going to be a lot stronger, but if you're really desperate, you could probably tape those down to get a connection going. I chose a nice strong wire from mine. That's why I've chosen the AV cable, but you could use whatever you like. It doesn't matter what type of cords or what type of wires you have going from there. Okay, so once you have the pedal, once you have it soldered into the controller, it doesn't have to be a PlayStation 1 controller, it can be any controller you found. I just showed a PlayStation 1 example, but the insides of any other controller may look a little bit different than this one, just keep that in mind. But you can test it out. You can press the wires to different sections of the controller and just see which one ends up hitting the right button combination. And once you've got that, then you can solder it down. If you have a PlayStation 1 controller like me, you can just follow my instructions. Otherwise, you can test it and figure it out yourself. Then the PlayStation 1 cord still comes out of the top as normal, and then it goes to a PlayStation 1 controller input. That one, depending on what games you're playing, either goes in the first player or the second player. Now with the PlayStation 2 games, now the GunCon 2 for PlayStation 2 plugs in via USB. So here I've just got a USB extension cord that plugs into the USB slot down here, which is hard to see, I know, but it is there. And then I'm just going to plug the pedal into the first player. Now with PlayStation 1 games, the PlayStation 1 gun actually requires that first gun or controller slot, so then the pedal would just get moved over into the second player port. So it requires a little bit of fiddling around to begin with, then once you got the hang of it, it's alright. So I'm playing a PlayStation 2 game, which is Time Crisis 2. I'm going to put my pedal into the first control port. I've got my GunCon connected via USB. Let's see how it works. Okay, so I've got my GunCon 2. This is Time Crisis 2. I've got my GunCon 2 plugged in via USB. I've got my pedal, which is going into the PlayStation 1 controller, soldered in there. Then it goes into the first controller slot. For PlayStation 2 games, remember that changes when you're playing PlayStation 1, because your GunCon 1 needs to go into the first person control slot, so then this needs to move over one. But essentially, all it's doing is recognizing a button being pushed on a controller, and it should do our ducking motion for us. So I'll just turn this one off mute, we'll keep it low. We'll have a little look. I'm going to have to swap hands. Actually, I'll just hold it like this so we can see. Okay, the GunCon controllers are probably the best controller I've found. Even ones with rumble, third-party ones, not as good, not as well made as these ones. Okay, so here's my player, and when the pedal is pushed, it pops out of hiding, and then I can duck back in by letting it go. And normally this would be on the ground and I'd be pushing it with my foot. This is just a demonstration, so as you can see, works perfectly as just a button press, which just gives it that arcade feel, and especially if you have an arcade cabinet to go with it, it just really gives that arcade feel at home. Thank you for watching. Hopefully this inspires you to do something similar. If you've got any questions, please shoot them through to me. If you like what you see, please like and subscribe, and I have more of these type of arcade videos coming up, and I do a bunch of pickup videos and things like that as well.